Our speaker, as you know, is Brenda Powell, who has a fantastic story to tell about her life, her tragic life, which she has turned around and created the Dreamcatcher Foundation. I really don't have that much more to add because the presentation that Brenda's going to give is kind of her own introduction, telling her life story and what she's currently doing now with Dreamcatchers. And I think with that, we will turn it over to Brenda.
Trust after being in the streets for so long.
Okay, slow down, slow down.
Sweetie, you need condoms.
I know. We're painties. I used to be right out here too.
Brenda was a survivor.
This is one of the most dangerous spots.
That's why I hardly ever come out here.
It was so much control. It was horrible.
Most abusers start out real sweet. And once they start, it's almost impossible to stop.
I'm here to tell each and every one of you today, it is not your fault. Look at my eyes. It's going to be okay.
You didn't know there was somebody that could reach out and hold your hand till you could learn how to walk.
What we need is the information to learn how to fight human trafficking.
And that's what we do.
If you know somebody got your back, you'll make it.
And you were so courageous. You deserve to be happy. You got any dreams you want to catch?
Well, that's Dreamcatcher film, and it's a documentary that was made in 2013 about the work that I do with Dreamcatcher. And
stand by the mic.
Oh, I've got a big mouth.
Or if you'd rather have a hand mic, we can give you that.
Okay. Beautiful. All right. I'm very proud of the film, and that's not the first documentary I made, but this documentary was just done so well that it got really into the heart of everything that was going on. So I'm really proud of it. The director has won the Sundance Film Festival already. It's one of the top 20 documentaries out to 2015, and it's being viewed all over the world. So I'm really happy with that. So let me take my time, because I get hot real fast. These flashes, I tell you. But listen, I'm going to take you a place with me into my life, okay? Because I remember having breakfast like a month ago with one of my daughters, and she looked at me and she says, "Ma, your journey had to be like it was in order for you to do what you do today." And so my journey is what it is, you know. And so just sit back and relax, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born on the west side of Chicago to a 15-year-old girl. My mother was a very beautiful woman. I have one picture of her, and she had me at 15 years old, and 6 months later, she died. I have no idea actually what my mother passed from. My grandmother was a great woman, but she was alcoholic. And back in those days, she was a functioning alcoholic. She went to work every day, but she drank. And her education was maybe 3rd grade. If they told her what my mother died of, I don't think she really paid any attention. All she knew that my mother was dead. And she never could tell me actually what my mother passed of. On the death certificate, it says natural causes. No girl dies at 16 years old from natural causes. So I don't know what my mother passed about. I know she wasn't there. And my grandmother took over the care of me. My grandmother was amazing. when she wasn't drinking. She would bake pies. She would read me the funny papers. She could sew. She would teach me how to sew. She was funny. She would even go overboard to scare me. You know, like, ooh, I'm a ghost. You know, there and things like that. Because it was just always us. It was just me and her. But when she was drinking, she became another person. So it was like me living in a household with two people. You know, the Dr. and Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I didn't know when that other person, I finally learned when that other person was going to show up. You know, my first molestation was at 4 or 5 years old. And my grandmother would go to the bar and she would come home, but she would bring her drinking partners home with her. And these were men that would touch me, that would do things to me. And in my family, my grandmother was always telling me, you got to be tough, no crying, all that kind of stuff like that. And I never knew what to do with that. And I was afraid in so many ways. And then the people who were damaging me were telling me, I was really afraid to tell. And I kept all that stuff inside me. But this was like consistently. It was all the time that I was getting molested. I almost knew when it was going to happen. I would see the guy come in with a large bottle of liquor, and he would pour her large drinks, and he would hardly drink anything, and she would drink with him until she was totally intoxicated or would pass out, and then he would come at me. And I knew it was going to happen. There was almost anything I could do about it. So I remember going into a world of my own because my childhood was taken from me without my permission. And I used to have this imagination that was huge in order to escape what was going on with me. And so my friends were like Diana Ross and the Supremes and Elvis Presley and Beach Party Crew. And that's what I used to do because I used to watch those movies, and those were my friends. And I remember playing with those people in order to get out the world of what was really happening to me, you know, because I wanted to be shiny. I wanted to be shiny. I love pink. I love feathers. I love bows. I wanted to be shiny. You know, I didn't know what I really wanted to be yet, but I just knew that I wanted to be somebody special. And I used to get in the mirror and sing, and I would be Diana Ross, you know, in my own little world. But the thing about it is that those things were being taken from me. At 9 years old, we moved into an area where prostitutes worked right in front of our apartment building. And I would see those women out there working, but they were shiny. They had the shiny dresses on and the hair and everything, and I would they were like Diana Ross and the Suburbans. So I asked my grandmother one day, I said, what are those women doing? She said, well, I told you to never take your panties off for little boys. They take their panties off and men give them money. And I remember saying to myself, oh, I'll probably do that. And my grandmother was in one of her places at that time, and she never said, don't do that. That's not who you are. That's not, you're special. Don't do that. She said, well, whatever you be the best. And I remember deciding that I was going to be the best one of those ladies that I could be. During that time, I had an Aunt Josie, who was my mother's sister. And because that my grandmother was so abusive when she got drunk, she started beating me a lot. And that's how I got out here in the North Shore. And I remember it was around about the time that Martin Luther King was assassinated. I remember looking at that on TV. I went to Dewey in Evanston for my first school, and then I transferred to an amazing school that was here called College Hill. I don't know even if it exists anymore, but it was an elementary. It was up to fifth grade, and it was predominantly Jewish people there, and I loved it. I absolutely loved that school because, you know, they had so many holidays. It was ridiculous. It was like, I really love this, and it was where I started to bloom and come to some, you know, my education, because I was always smart. I was a very smart kid. you know, and there was never, even coming from the inner city out here to the suburbs, I caught up real fast. And I was in gymnastics, everything was like, I was happy. And I was having consistency in my life, you know, with my aunt. Life was doing well. I had 2 boy cousins to fight with, and it was great, you know. It was just a really good. And then one day, and I remember I had no idea that I was developing as a girl. I was such a tomboy at that time. And I just, maybe because of the molestation, I always played it rough with the guys, you know, so I could just be a boy. But that didn't stop my uncle from molesting me also. And that safe haven that I had created and that was created for me out here became the place I couldn't stay. And for some reason, it hurt me more for him than anybody. It seemed like I was actually getting over what had happened to me. But for him to do it is what broke it, because he was my protector. You know, he is the one. I felt those guys, the other guys were cut in, and I know now those other men were strangers. They didn't, but this was somebody they was supposed to care for me. And I looked at him as a hero. He was tall, and I used to look at him like, oh, I'm so protected now. This is my hero. I'm in this family, and I'm safe for the first time in my life. And then it happened because my uncle molested me. And I couldn't stay in that beautiful home, and that beautiful, with all these beautiful things going to me. I had to leave. And I remember asking my grandmother, could I come back home? She wasn't ready for me, but she took me. And we moved back on the west side, and it just went downhill from there. After that, I really didn't care for school. You know, I just didn't. And I was the little girl in the community that the boys could do what they wanted to do with, because all I wanted to do was somebody to like me. I wanted someone to tell me I was pretty, because my grandmother used to get drunk now more than ever, and she would call me names, and she used to tell me, you're not pretty, you're not going to ever be pretty. She talked about me really bad, and to escape the damage that she was doing, I was looking for somebody to tell me something else. And if a boy told me I was pretty or that he liked me, I would do what he wanted me to do. That was the type of girl I was in the neighborhood. And I got pregnant by a little boy at 14 years old. It was my first kid. Maybe 13 going on 14, because I had her at 14. And then I got pregnant again just before my 15th birthday with another little girl, because I didn't have what it takes to say no. I didn't think I was valuable. So just before my 15th birthday, Good Friday, 1973, I had this other baby, and I had got 6 weeks after I had this kid. And my grandmother decides to tell me that I need to support this family, because it's my fault that everything had went to shams. We didn't have anything in the refrigerator. We had no food. She was on welfare. Her check didn't come. She blamed that on me. Everything was blamed on me. And she was very harsh, very rude, very cold-blooded to me. And I could not bear that house. But she told me I needed to go get some money. I'm 15 years old, okay? I don't know how to go get no money. But during that time, there was a huge thing about black exploitation movies about pimps, prostitutes, you know, all of those type of movies were out that we used to watch. And in my community, the community that I was living in, pimps were heroes, because they had the Cadillacs and they had the flashy clothes, and people in the community looked up to them, because most of the community was on welfare. They didn't have things, and even if they were, there was a lot of domestic violence. I remember growing up looking at people fight and hurt each other all the time. But that community looked up to these type of people. And I remember asking one of those girls, where did she go when she did this? Because I needed to get some money in my hands to help my family. And she looked at me, she says, girl, you too young. And I said, but I need to go. And she told me where to go. So I put this little dress on and these little $2 shoes, and I went down to Clark and Division and stood in front of the Mark Twain Hotel with all the courage that I could muster up and stood there on the corner. And they came and they picked me up and they put me in the car and I cried and they knew that I was a baby, but they still gave me money and they still had sex with me. I didn't even know really what to do, but they showed me. These men showed me. And in the time, I think of it now how, you know, I was crying and explaining to them what was going on with me. It would seem like someone would say, oh, that's a shame. I have a daughter too. I want you to go home or something like that. But they never said that. In fact, most of them got more excited that I was so young. And they said, don't worry about it. We'll teach you the ropes. I'll be a regular guy for you. You know. And that night I took home $400, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And I took it home and I handed it over to my grandmother. And she was happy. We didn't argue. She didn't call me so many names. So I continued to go down there on the weekends with my little dress and my $2 shoes and my tears. About the fourth week I went down there and I had saw these guys and they were pimps. I didn't know what they were at that time. I just knew that they told me that they were pimps and that I needed to have representation. And nobody was down there with me, but I was smart enough to tell them that I have a guy. He'll be back soon. Well, they said they needed to see somebody. And if I didn't have a man, that I couldn't work there. And usually when I'm working down there, I would be able to duck them or hop in a car or elude them in some type of way. But this day I wasn't. This particular night I didn't. They caught me in the middle of the block. One got out and he started walking behind me real fast while the other one drove the car slowly beside me. And I remember starting to get into a run position, and before I could, he grabbed me around my neck, he busted me in the head with a pistol, and they put me in the trunk of the car. And they put me in the trunk of the car, and I was in there forever. And when the trunk opened, I was nothing around but corn, just all corn. And I was in the middle of a cornfield. But when they got me out and they put a pistol to my head, it told me I was under pimp arrest and that I had to do what they wanted me to do. And I cried and let me go. Please, I won't tell anybody. Just please just let me go. And they wouldn't let me go. They told me I was under pimp arrest. They took me to a little hotel, a little seedy hotel, and they locked me in the closet for 2 days. And for those 2 days, I did everything bodily that people do because I was scared. And I was hungry, and I finally begged them to let me out and let me eat. And they said, no, we're not going to feed you unless you go to work. And I said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just let me out this closet. And they let me out the closet, and I thought I'd have a better chance of getting away. But it was 2 of them, and everywhere they took me, they were really right there. And they used to take me to truck stops and make me work while they were right there. And you know, I even cried in the truck stops, and nobody cared about that. It wasn't their problem. I mean, talking about the customers, the Johns, the people who accept prostitution, the demand side, you know, the things that happen out there to the girls, because I was a baby, and they knew I was a baby. Nobody tried to help me. You know, I ended up being there with those guys for 6 months, and they captured another girl. They got another girl just the same way they got me, and me and her were intending on running away together, you know, but we never got to that place because one day I got in a truck. I opened the door because what you do is you go to the truck, you open the door and ask the guy, do you want any company? And he looked at me, he says, well, what you want, little girl? And when he said that, I started crying. He said, hey, where your mama? And I started telling and dolling out my story to him. And he said, get in. And first time anyone listened. And he said, this is crazy. This is horrible. He says, I'm going to get you out of here. Because he says, I'm going to call the police. I said, no, they'll kill me. He says, all right, I'm going to get you out of here. He says, get in the back of my sleeper. And he pulls out this really big gun, right? First, he was a huge guy, you know. And he told me, he said, I'm going to get you out of here. And when he pulled out the gun, I believed him. I said, oh, yeah, he's finna get me out of here. You know, this guy took me all the way home. I don't know where he was supposed to go, but he brought me back to Chicago. And he said, I'm going to go upstairs and tell your mama, because he's real Southern. He said, I'm going to tell your mama what happened to you. I said, no, I'm just glad to be here. Thank you so much, you know. He says, you be good, girl. He said, be careful, right? He left and went upstairs. And when my grandmother opened his door, she was livid. She called me so many names. She talked to me so terrible. She didn't. And that caught me off guard because I thought that I would go into the door and I had pictured in my mind, where you are, I love you, we miss you, you know. I knew that. And one thing that kept me strong the whole time is that I knew somebody was looking for me. I knew somebody was looking for me. I said, they looking for me and they gonna find me because I know they looking for me, you know. So I stayed strong. I had to hold on because I knew they were looking for me. And then she told me that she never looked for me. She never looked for me. She never looked for me. She never called the police. She never looked for me. So that hurt more than anything. That's what hurt. Because I wasn't special enough or valuable enough to look for. So I stayed home for maybe a week and I left again. This time I left. Because I didn't feel great. I didn't feel special. And then I know now I had been totally traumatized and things like that. And I probably couldn't stay, you know, without some love and some help and things like that. But it wasn't like that there. And I left and went back into the streets. And within 2 days, I met another pimp. And this time, this was a different type. He wasn't a mean or gorilla pimp. He was the type that are the worst. He was the sweet sugar daddy, coercion type pimp who tells you you're beautiful, who doesn't even let you know this is what he wants you to do. He's your boyfriend. He loves you. You're the best thing that ever happened. And he takes you in and he understands everything and he listens to you and laughs at your jokes and tells you every time he gets a chance that you're beautiful. And if you're a little vulnerable girl that's been through what I've been through, you like that. You need that. And I needed that. And I'm not going to tell you I was naive. I knew all the time what he wanted me to do, but it was better than being at home. It was better than being there with her. So I was with him for many years, for about 7 years. And we went with other pimps, and that was my life. And in between that time, I've been shot 5 times. I've been stabbed over 13 times. I got trunked a couple of them more times. That was my life, and that's the way it lived, and that's what I did. At the end of the road, I was on the west side of Chicago. Now, in the 25 years that I was involved in prostitution, I've been all over the country and abroad, because you can go anywhere. And pimps take you all over the country so that they can make sure that you don't get close to your family, your friends, you know nobody. So I kind of traveled all over, and I was part of all kinds of types of venues of prostitution, strip clubs, escorting, the ranches in Nevada, everything that you can name I've been a part of. And I wasn't a drug-addicted prostitute. I was a girl that was lost in that lifestyle. And at the very end, just before I got clean, is when I started using drugs, because you cannot continue to do things like that without putting something on top of the pain. And I always said I would never do a drug. I would never drink because of where I came from, where my grandmother being an alcoholic and things like that. But I remember the first day I ever took my first drink of liquor. I remember everything. And I can tell you why I did it and why I felt so low, because it had gotten to the point that if I didn't do something and put something on top of the pain, I would have killed myself. I was so close to suicide. I was reaching my bottom. I was at my bottom, and I was on the west side of Chicago. And my last customer on Madison, right over there on the west side, I got in a car with this guy in a Mercedes, Caucasian guy, looked very harmless. I used to try to pick guys that looked harmless because of the violence that happens out there. And I got in the car with this guy, and he wasn't harmless. He pulled over, he parked, he gave me money, and he started to beat me. And he was beating me so bad. I mean, I had become quite a little squabbler myself, but he was really tearing me up. And I remember trying to block his fist and get out the car. And I had my hand on the doorknob, and I'm, trying to stop him from hitting me and get out the car. He starts the car up, and then he starts to drive off. And as my leg is outside the car, and as I'm getting out, and my clothes caught hold to the car, and he ended up dragging me 6 blocks with the car. And when I got up off the ground, I had no face and no skin on the side of my body. I had no face. I got up off that ground, and I looked around, and there were children all around me on bikes, and they looked at me, and I said, oh my God. I said, did you guys see that? They said, yeah, we saw everything, lady. And one little girl came with a lot of tissue on her head. She said, here. And I didn't even realize how I was bleeding. And she handed it to me. And I remember walking down the street half dazed, not really coherent, and people whispering and looking at me. And some friends drove up. And they said, what happened to you? And I told them what happened. And they took me and dropped me off at the emergency room at the county hospital. Okay? I get into the county hospital. They rush me to the emergency room. They think, I don't know what they thought in the beginning, who I was or whatever happened, but at first it was going well until a police officer walked in. And he said, oh, I know her. She's a whore. She said she probably hurt some poor guy and got what she deserved. And I could hear him talking to this nurse. They didn't say it directly to me, but right behind this little curtain that they pulled, as if I didn't exist and I wasn't there. And let me tell you something. When I was a little girl, anybody ever remember the movie The Bad Seed? Okay. Like my grandmother used to tell me to make me watch the movie, say, you the bad seed. And if you saw that movie, that's not a good connection. So my thing about God was that he will strike you down with lightning, and you better watch out, because a girl like me, God didn't care about or didn't like, because I was a bad girl. And so all the time that I was out there, I didn't reach out. I never thought that I was loved, or I was important, or somebody could care about me. You understand? But that time, and when I got in that hospital, I remember after I heard them say that, I put my head down and I said, God, these people don't care about me. Can you help me? And I remember wanting to die, and I laid down on the gurney, and they pushed me back out into the waiting room like I didn't exist. And I didn't get waited on to the next shift when a woman doctor came on, and she grabbed me, and she made a big fuss about what was going on, and she put me in the hospital I stayed there for a week. And they told me that I probably would never have a face again, and I wouldn't heal, probably wouldn't heal correctly. There was nothing they can do, and they released me from the hospital. But this woman, this doctor, she came by every day. She would sit there and she would look at me, she'd talk to me, she'd smile. She was just friendly. She was just friendly. And I would look forward to her coming to see me, And sometimes she'd just sit there and do her charts, and she would chat with me. And I remember she told me something. She said, Brenda, you're a beautiful girl. You're a good girl. She says, I'm just afraid that one day I'm going to have to identify you in the morgue. She says, because your history doesn't look good. She says, would you mind going to see social service when you leave here? I said, girl, no. I said, because what I know about social services, they ain't real social. And they never were, But I said, I'll do it for you, okay? She says, pick up your medicine and go see social services. And I did. And they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't have a clue, I remember looking in the guy's eyes, and he was like, I don't know where I can send you. And he was very bland and very uncaring. But I remembered in my mind that this place used to come and talk to us when we were in jail. And I remember these outreach workers that used to be on the street, and they used to come and give us condoms and give us cookies and talk to us and stuff. I said, it's a place that these people told me I could come if I was tired. I said, why don't you call them? And I told him the name. He looked it up and he called it. It was called Genesis House. And I said, I'm going to go to Genesis House. And he gave me bus fare, and I remember sitting on the bus wrapped up like a mummy, and the kids were getting out of school. Don't you love kids? You just want to kill them, don't you? And these kids were sitting there, and they were looking at me, and the little girl looked at the little boy. She said, "Look at the monster." And I was like crying on the inside, and I was like, she just doesn't know, you know. But I made it to Genesis' house. And when the lady that used to come into the jail was this lady who I'm sure was from the 60s, and she was a hippie. I know she was, because she talked like she had just like, you know, like was on the end of her LSD trip. She used to talk like, when you're tired, when you're tired. And I was like, speed it up, please. Gonna take all day to give us the cookies. Wow. But she was really an angel in disguise. And when I walked into Genesis' house, the first face I saw was hers. And it was different. It was not institutional. It was not a office. It was a house. It was a beautiful house on the north side of Chicago. And I went in there, and the first thing I saw was the living room and the sofa, and I was tired, and I was medicated, and I just wanted, you know, I just wanted something, but I didn't know what I wanted, but they knew what I wanted. And they invited me in, and they said, are you hungry? Hey, let's help you. You need help taking a shower? We're going to get you some fresh clothes. And they said, lay down, and we'll assess you later, because you look tired. And I said, okay, you know. But that night, while I was in bed, while I was sleeping, this girl, this lady, Brenda, her name was Brenda too, and she used to come up to the room where I was, and she was changing my bandages and giving me my medication, and she would cover up, and I remember she put a little teddy bear in my arm and covered me up, and as if I was hers. You know what I'm saying? She cared. And I remember laying down, I said, wow, that was nice. And my first fight for the next month was to recover my face, and they told me there was no hope, you know. And I remember she said, there's always hope. Don't ever let nobody tell you there's no help. So she went and got these books, because, like I said, she was a hippie, and she had all these herbs and these things that she was like natural healing over the world. And she started to bring stuff and put it on my face, and I met the woman who founded this place named Edwina Gately, and she became and still is like my mother. The mother that I never had. She adopted me and opened her arms, not legally, but she just adopted me and embraced me and allows me to call her mother. And I think I needed that. I needed somebody to call mother. I needed somebody to call that, you know, somebody that acted as if, and to make me, and it helped me regain. It took a village to raise me again. On Monday, I was in therapy. On Tuesday, I was in trauma. I was at trauma services. On Wednesday, I was at survivor molestation. On Thursday, I was at anger management. I went to anger management, in fact, two days a week, because I was real mad. And all these amazing women from the North Shore, from Skokie, Wilmette, and Evanston used to volunteer at Genesis' house, right? And they would bring their casserole dishes and stuff, you know, the expensive one, the emerald and stuff, you know, cost a lot of money, man. And they would bring those wonderful casseroles, because they would cook for us on Wednesdays, right? And they would come in, and, you know, they were very, you know, prestigious and looking all, you know, and I'm like, what they want? You know, but they would bring these wonderful dishes, and then they would come outside on the porch, and they would talk to us. And I remember a woman from Evanston gave me a journal, and it was pretty. And she says, I want you to write here, Brenda, write about what's going on with you. And she gave me the best gift I ever had, because I started to write, and I couldn't stop. And every Wednesday that she would come over, I would be in the window waiting for her so I could read to her what I had written. And she started to help me heal. And then these women that used to come over there started to come in and show us how to dress and show us how. I remember they took us to a dinner at the Marshall Fields, where, you know, upstairs there's the nice place, and we had no idea how to eat on all those, you know, We didn't know what's going on. But when we left the dinner, we said, hey, can you teach us how to do that? And she took us to her home in Evanston and gave us a dinner party and showed us how to eat. But they would come and just do such great things for us and mentor us. They mentor us back. They showed such unconditional love that we didn't never know that was out there, and that was special to me. And this woman's name was Carolyn Grove. She was amazing. We still keep in contact. I'm still part of her family. I found people that love you unconditionally just because. And I never knew that in my life, you know. And so when I started my new life, I started to love back. I started to give people what was given to me. And it just made sense for me to go back and help other women like me, because I couldn't sit still knowing that there were still girls out there getting killed, getting murdered, getting convicted for felonies, just in the gutter almost, you know. How could I sit still? And I knew my sisters were still out there. And I started advocating on behalf of women in prostitution and being the face. And I reconnected with my daughters, and I started to tell them what I wanted to do, and they always supported me. They said, "Mother, do what you need to do, and we support you because it's your story." And I started to tell my story to people, and I started to advocate with in Springfield, and I started to really get into this. And I had a full-time job. I've always had a full-time job, but I've always done this, advocating and working with girls after I get off work, because my job pays my bills. But what I do after that with this pays my spirit. So that's what I have to do in order to continue to live, to continue to love, continue to stay clean. I've been away from human trafficking and drugs for 19 years now, and everything that I do seems to, for some reason, put me in the realm of helping somebody else. And I'm cool with that, because I believe that if we don't pay rent on this, we got to pay rent on earth with service. Service is that you help or you care about somebody else, just because you're supposed to. And you reach out and go outside yourself and say, here. When I don't expect nothing back. People call me a hero. I am not a hero. I am a servant. Because if it was up to me, I would be on my couch right now watching Law and Order, you know what I'm saying, with a plate, you know what I'm saying. That's my ideal of having fun, okay? I don't know what God, and I kind of know, I do know my purpose. My purpose is to do what I do because I do it well. How would I not do it? What would I do if I didn't reach out for girls, you know? I met my best friend in the world, Stephanie, in treatment, because Genesis House sent me to the treatment, you know, for drugs, and I met her there. She was in treatment, and talk about two opposites, you know. I was a prostitute, and she was a woman with a degree who was on drugs, you know. She had, you know, I thought she was fascinating, but she loved me. She was the first person that ever listened to me and used to make me feel important, and we became best friends. And she said, we're going to leave here, and we're going to do something real big, and we're going to do it together. I said, okay, all right. Well, we did both leave, and I went to go to Genesis House, back to Genesis House, and she went to an apartment, but she had some issues. She had to go. She used a couple more times, but she finally got it together. And when she got it together, her and I created the Dreamcatcher Foundation in 2007. And she was married, and I was married, and her husband had just bought her a little Ford Focus for their anniversary. And we were out in that Ford Focus with some bottles of water, some condoms, you know what I'm saying, in the backseat of the car, just laughing and talking to girls on the street. That's what we did. And it started to grow, and it started to get huge, and we started to get young girls, very young girls, 12 and 11 years old, who were telling us about their prostitution or what they were doing to survive, or, you know, their mother was in the penitentiary, but nobody was looking after them, and there's just so much pain out there that we had that kept making us come out there in the evening time and work with these ladies. And then she got a 501c3, and we went, and here we are still today, working it out. Not because we thought of anything except that it was a good way to give back, you know? And it just makes sense that we would do that. And since 2007, we have reached out to over 3,000 young ladies in some type of way. I'm talking about by just speaking to them, condoms, giving them services, referrals, different things like that, over 3,000. We have sent over 14 girls, seen them all the way through school, and sent them to a college, city college or full scholarship. They started with us when they were in the 7th and 8th grade, and now they're doing really well. We have a consistent base of young girls all over the city, from group homes, from interventions, from referrals from DCFS that we service on a regular basis. I go into the high schools, I go wherever I'm needed because we got an epidemic. Chicago is the 3rd largest hub in the United States for human trafficking. It was number 5 when I started this process. We raised it up to number 3, and nothing's happening here in order to fight that. Because if you talk to Chicago police, they say, well, the guns are more prevalent, and that's why it's not so much put on human trafficking, but our girls are being exposed and are out there dying every day because they're so open to predators. You know, you leave here and you go home and you get your kids and you lock the door and you protect your family, right? And you think you're okay because you're there and you're okay. But soon as that child, that kid, that girl, or that boy clicks on a computer, open up to the world of all the mess, the predators, the traffickers, and all the garbage that's out there. Because pimps are use technology in order to reach our children. They know where to go get them. And if that girl is on that computer and she's lonely and her mother and her are having an argument, she needs somebody to understand her. She's been in a bad space and her friends are ostracizing her. She doesn't feel confident about herself. He can get her. I've done a research with pimps. It's called Victim to Victimizer. You can look it up, and it was done. DePaul University. You can look up on the DePaul University site. And it says clearly, they said we eat, drink, and drink new ways to find ways to recruit young girls. This is what we do. If you don't take your daughter to school, if you don't pick your daughter up from school, I'll pick her up. If you're not at the mall with your kid, I'm going to join her at the mall. One of the hugest places for pimps that they have seem to find girls is at malls. You know, we've arrested. I also work for the Cook County Sheriff's Department. Tom Dart called me in special to come work with his human trafficking response team. And I work on a daily basis with a group of wonderful officers, and that's the only law enforcement that I know in the country that has went above and beyond his call in what he wants to do in human trafficking. Tom Dart is amazing. He hired 3 survivors of prostitution as employees. I'm a Cook County employee. All right, not bad for an old prostitute, huh? And just last year, an amazing organization, which you should have them call you, or you should call them in too, Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation, helped me vacate my whole record. I don't have a record anymore. But these are amazing. CASE is an amazing organization that talks about the demand side of this human trafficking, because without demand, there'd be no supply. You know, there's a Nordic model in Switzerland where instead of arresting the girls, they arrest the men and they lock them up and put them in a penitentiary if they continue, right? Guess what? Prostitution went down, human trafficking went down immensely. Where in Amsterdam, where they legalized it, it got worse because the demand for younger girls got huge, and now they're further bringing babies over from third world countries to supply the demand. Do you get this? This is not a one-sided thing. It's not just one person here that's out there doing this. It's just not the prostitute, and most people focus on the woman. We need to start focus on why men buy sex. We need to start a new culture and generation of young men who don't. CASE also has a research about, they did a research with men who buy sex. Johns, and they interviewed 80. I was part of the one of the interviewers, right? They put an ad on Craigslist, and they showed their little selves up. They came. I'm like, at first I said, ain't nobody gonna come, you know, but they came just as proud to be doing what they're doing. This is just not something we can overlook. If this is an epidemic, if we're at a third largest hub here in the city of Chicago, there's something wrong, right? You've got to be a part of the solution in any little way you can, whether it's volunteering, whether it's gathering toiletries for an organization like mine, whether it's donations, whether it's utilizing your talents as far as to, you know, whether it's making a phone call. Sometimes when we go down and we want to get a bill passed to help young ladies in human trafficking, you got to get involved. Because this is not just something that's happening in our inner city, it's happening all over. We arrest girls more in the north suburbs than we do anywhere. O'Hare is filled with young girls. Why? Because it's an airport, right? Girls come from all over the country, and they rent rooms in hotels out here in the North Shore, in Rosemont, all over, and they're being trafficked in these hotels. And they're our babies, you know. They're not being our biological kids. Aren't these our kids? Don't we need to stand up and fight for those who are not able to fight for themselves? You know, a lot of people would say, okay, they should just legalize it or whatever they do. We don't need to do that. You know, especially when it's affecting our babies. We need to fight this. This is such a hard thing to think about, but yet it's happening and everywhere. And anytime that you want to have any kind of information, or if you want to look it up, please go into DePaul University, where I've done several researches that were published by DePaul, Victim to Victimizer with Jody Raphael, and young girls trafficked right here in Chicago, who at the time I spoke to them were under pimp control. Look on the Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation website. I'm going to give you all this information so you can give it out, so you can look at it and just read a little bit about what's happening in your own community, right in your own backyard. Okay, look at the arrests sometimes in your own community. It's public knowledge. Or in the area, you know, close to you. See, how many times have they arrested out here or anything like that, and find out what's going on, so you can know that this is real. This is what's happening. Human trafficking is real with our boys and girls. Somebody needs to do about it. The average age that I work with is 12 to 25. And I'm going to invite you to be a part of Dreamcatcher. You know what I'm saying? Be a dream maker. Be a dream maker. Help give back some dreams to these people. You know, these girls are amazing. And if you watch the documentary, you'll see exactly what I do. I get out there and kick major butt, right? Because, you know, what can they do to me now? You know, for real. You know, I've been through everything else, okay? So I'm cool now. But I think that God has a wonderful sense of humor. He takes the worst, you know, and expects the best. You know, so I'm not going to mess with God, so I do what I do, you know. And I feel good. I feel good. I've adopted a little boy. I'm married. I'm a married woman. This is something they told me would never happen for me because of who I was and where I'd been through. But I'm married to an awesome man, you know, who loves me to death. You know what I'm saying? And we adopted a little boy who was, if you see the documentary, his mother. I'm always trying to help her. But we ended up adopting him, and he's amazing. And my daughters are wonderful. One is a doctor. One is in criminal justice. They're just divas, you know what I'm saying? They're far more smarter and beautiful than their mother, you know what I'm saying? That's hard. It's hard to get, yeah, that's hard. But they are, and out of all that garbage is so much grace and mercy, and wonderful things are happening in my life. But I couldn't enjoy any of it if I wasn't doing this work. So I just want to thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello. I have a question about, probably you know that there are some places in Nevada where prostitution is legal, and I would like to know what their model, their business model is, and how they ensure that the women working there are not exploited.
Okay, they don't. They don't. They don't care. And when you say they make sure that the women are not exploited, they're exploiting the women. Okay? I worked in the ranches. I know Dennis. I know that creep. I know Joe Conforte. I know all those people that run the, and it's not legal in Las Vegas. It's legal in the unincorporated areas all around Nevada that have a population less than 250,000, and they can put up a trailer or whatever and start peddling women. And you would think that because you saw the Bunny Ranch and that it looked like everybody's all having a great time, but it's not like that. And I want to let you know that's not what prostitution is, okay? It's not some woman a lot of times that had a choice to do what she's doing. It's most of the time came from no choice at all. And then when you think about it, most of these girls started as girls when they didn't have, if they could have, they would have done something else. So it's still exploitive. I worked in the ranches. The ranches get 40 to 50% of your money. They cut that money in half. How exploited is that? And then they make you pay rent out of the money that you have. And then they do things like they fine you. It's really something that is very, it's exploitive. The whole capture of it. There's a lineup. You come in and the girls line up. And the men look at them like cattle, and they pick out the girl. And if you're late for that lineup, they fine you. You know, it's rigged for the girl not to make the money, and for the ranch to make all the money. And if you think about it, if a girl on that ranch, right, works 1 year, and work 1 year, and I'm gonna get a lot of money, right, and she gets 5 customers a day, okay, and she works for 365 days. You would just say that. And she just does 5 guys a night, right? 5 times 365. How many men has she slept with? Over 1,800, right? How happy would you be? Is that something that, you know, because nobody came with roses. This is not a relationship. We ain't intimate. A lot of times, and I'm not putting men down, they think of it as just sex. Well, if I could just do that and make money, I'd be wonderful. No, you wouldn't. It would break anybody down. It would. It's just not that simple. So when you say, how do they protect them from being exploited? They don't. Because most of the girls that I worked with when I was there were sending money home to pimps.
I do read a lot the local reports, police reports, and in Skokie there seems to be a lot of activity at the roadway inn, right, a little bit east of Skokie Boulevard. And I talked to the police about it, and they said that they went there and they're upset about it, and they go there all the time, and they talk to the hotel owner, manager, and they say, hey, like, do you know this is sex trafficking? And supposedly the answer came back from the manager, yes, I do know. So what can residents do?
The community can come together and they can petition this guy. You can petition him. You can get him closed down. You got the right to do that as a community. One of the things that Chicago Line case does is they have packets to show how the community can get involved and work in getting stuff like that taken care of. It's not an easy process, but the publicity that it would bring to that that hotel, and there's all kinds of licenses that he could lose in reference to that. So it is in your hands. That's the you're the ballers. You know what I'm saying? As a community, you have the right. There was a community in Chicago, Bucktown. You remember how the prostitution that was there, right on North Avenue, over that bridge where Home Depot is. That community got together. You know, I wasn't crazy about the way they did it, and they became very perceptive to I was one of the first survivors to go in the community and try to educate them on what was happening to girls. But in the beginning, they came together and they got with their aldermen and their state representatives and they started making the phone calls, and the next thing you know, there was some stuff that was happening with that, and prostitution doesn't exist in there. But now they're much more proactive in what happens to the girls, you know. But as a community, you can do that. You know,
believe it or not, I live in Wilmette, and there's even a hotel in Wilmette where that's going on.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, we all think of Wilmette as, well, it's
absolutely.
Wilmette, you know.
I love Wilmette, but I mean, hey, I know girls from Wilmette. I know girls from all over this area, you know, and you just, because you never know the dynamics of a family. You know, what looks good on the outside don't mean that's what's happening on the inside. I have a young lady who's in the Cook County Jail now who told me she's from Wilmette. And she says, my daddy was, he dealt with taxes, right? And he was very good. And he was very good at what he did. But he was a drug addict, you know, and he didn't pay her a lot of attention. And she was at home, and she used to literally have guys come into her house. She was, ever since she was 15 years old. And she told me, and I said, that blew me. You know, I'm saying, for real? You know, but, you know, because there's so much things, there are things going on in families you never know. Well, that's one of the hugest things about human trafficking, that people want to look at the issue after it's happened, but we have to look at the prevention part of it, the beforehand. And one of the things that we got to talk about and we got to look at in our communities is incest and molestation in the homes, in the families. We got to look at these signs. We got to open our eyes to it. We have to believe our children. We have to see, if we work in the school system, if we're working closely with kids, we got to pay attention to these kids and see if anything's happening to them that their parents are missing, or if their parents are a part of it. You just never know. But we're so afraid of that subject. It's scary, though, isn't it? To know that it's not safe in your home.
I have two questions. One has to do with how would you dampen the demand side other than the criminalization, which you mentioned from Scandinavia? And then the second thing is should prostitution be legal? Okay,
so you said first what? How did I what?
How would you lessen demand?
Oh, well, first of all, besides the criminalization, education. I would educate the guys on the harm that they're doing. That's a huge piece right there. And I would start with the young men. You understand? Because sometimes old habits are hard to break, right? Because we talk to customers, and we talk to, you know, the Johns all the time, and they even have a website. You know, they call it The Hobby. They think this is cool, you know. But if we start with our next generation, because in the research that when we interviewed these guys, one of the things they said, who first started you? How did you ever get into this? You know, and they would always revert back to somebody who was close to them, that took them to their first prostitute, or took them to a strip club, or took them, you know, introduced them into the sex industry in some kind of way. And then at that time, they didn't even want to deal with it. They didn't want that. But being a part of and thinking that the person that was taking them knew what was happening, and being a man, you know, it happened, you know, and it's such lack of responsibility in that whole thing when a person thinks they're paying for something and there's no responsibility behind it. You feel me? I'm going to answer your second question. Your second question?
About legalization.
No. Okay, how many of y'all believe that prostitution is the oldest profession? It's not. Agriculture is the oldest profession. Somebody might want to eat a potato or a tomato. You know, let's look at this. I do feel it's the oldest form of oppression and slavery toward women. It's not the oldest profession. I wouldn't legalize it because, like I said, it went all to hell. And we're legalizing something that none of you want to do. Okay? You know, you're talking about it's okay, just as if you're talking about let's legalize marijuana. Let's legalize dope. Shoot, let's legalize everything. You know, but what about the ramifications and the harm that comes behind it? You feel me? Women are already have a hard time in our society getting respect. Shoot, oh my God, getting paid. Just the whole, we use our body parts on commercials as advertisement. You can't buy a cell phone or a bottle of Coca-Cola or beer without some woman's breast sticking out or her booty in it. You know what I'm saying? What's that got to do with the drink? You know, I mean, we have objectified women so much. Why would we continue to do it? Aren't we the queens of this world? You know, aren't we the doorway to life? Don't out of our bodies come you guys? You know, we should be worshipped, actually. Anybody say amen? Yes, I can see it now. World worshiping women.
I'm wondering about that over here. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering about that moment where you broke free and went to the social service place and started getting taken care of. I'm wondering about how do organizations like Dreamcatcher keep these young girls safe from pimps coming back after them to drag them into the life. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how that works. As I think about young kids in gangs and how they sort of can't leave because of fear of that, if that makes sense.
Well, for the juveniles, we have there's you already know about Salvation Army, right? Promise has a great program, and they have a program called Ann's House, which is an undisclosed place in an undisclosed area where there's no address, there's no anything, you know, and they take these juveniles, and those are the ones that we're really worried about, right? But unfortunately, there's not one house in Chicago for women in prostitution. That's why I campaign. That's why I'm going to change that, you know what I'm saying? Because as Chicago is so far ahead in human trafficking and so many things that were done, but in that aspect, they haven't put a dime behind putting up a safe house, a safe place, since the demise of Genesis House, you know, and that's something that needs to be that's something that needs to be backed up. But they keep on saying we don't have the money. Well, when are you going to have the money? Are you going to continuously let these ladies fall to the wayside? Deborah's Place is not just for prostitutes, sweetheart. No, and that's another thing that they do. They stick women from human trafficking in places with other issues. That can't be done. We have to have our own specialized services, special population for the things that we've gone through. See what I'm saying? There is drug addiction at Deborah's House. There's domestic violence at Deborah's House. It's a pot. You know, sometimes I've sneakily tried to slip a girl into a domestic violence program because there are no programs, right? But she still needs that specialized trauma services. You know what I'm talking about, that special trauma, because even though she may be getting services, therapy, she needs that somebody who knows how to deal with her type of trauma, and then she needs to be dealing with a survivor who she can, you know, look at, who sees that this is possible. It just takes a whole village, like I said, to put that together, and it's possible because it's been done, but we have, you know, we're not doing it right now. We need to.
Okay. So let's separate the juveniles from the consenting adults.
Let's do that.
We live in a society where sex among two consenting adults is absolutely legal. Mm-hmm. Putting somebody in the trunk of a car, beating them up, holding them hostage, all of those are crimes that have laws, mm-hmm. that those crimes separated from sex. Mm-hmm. Can be prosecuted. We can do things about that. I think what happens is when you talk about consenting adults, so I want to know if you can concentrate I know you said you're interested in juveniles, and I think that you can probably have more success. Do we have organizations that are specifically for juveniles?
We do.
And if you could inform us of those, then we would know where and what we can support that has a chance of.
Well, my organization is specifically for juveniles. We go from 12 to 25. Most organizations go just up to 18. But for me, if a girl comes in, she's 17 and a half, how long do I have to work with her? You know what I mean? So we got it up to 25. But I will turn no woman down. I'll try to make sure that she gets the services that she needs. But that's my organization. We work with youth. This just Promise, the Salvation Army. They work with young girls, okay? That's an amazing program. You know, Brenda's not the only one on the block in Chicago working with young girls. But it's just not enough. I just told you that on a daily basis, 16,000 girls are trafficked. And that number came out in 2005. Could you imagine what it is today in 2015 with the internet prevalent and things like that? And with so many girls coming from other states all around the country. So, and you're talking about, and I love you when you talked about them extra crimes that were happening because they were juveniles. But guess what? It takes prosecution and evidence to do that. Now you're asking the victim to testify against the victimizer, and that's one of the hardest things after she's already traumatized and afraid and intimidated and probably still kind of likes them because they're very brainwashy. You understand, to stand in front of this man and testify against him, it's her word against his. So what the Cook County sheriffs have done is they have gotten permission to go in these cases as they do for drug stings, which they use wiretaps, right? So using wiretapping gets them all kinds of wonderful evidence, and the victim doesn't even have to, you know, she can testify, but it's just not as hard for them to get this guy if he's, you know, and I've seen it happen, you know. We just had a case where a pimp was basically beating a girl on his phone and told another pimp to listen to it, which, you know, got him 10 years, you know, which he should have gotten 50 or 100, but hey, they're getting better. Sheriff Dart, Anita Alvarez are serious about this. The Chicago Police Department needs to come on board. And then the thing about it is that your suburbs, your officers have been working a lot with the Cook County Sheriff, so they're pretty much interested in trying to help this situation also.